I refused to be my golden child brother's kidney donor. Then he planted drugs to get me arrested, and my parents tried to destroy my life. I'm 24. I always thought my family was pretty normal. I mean, they weren't super affectionate or anything, but they weren't cruel either. They always made sure we had what we needed, celebrated birthdays, did the whole we're a good family routine when other people were around. Nothing that screamed dysfunctional. I have an older brother, Blake, 28, male. If you had asked me a year ago, I would have said we were treated fairly. Not exactly the same, but nothing weird. But now I realize that my parents had me convinced of a lie growing up. I noticed little things that felt off. Nothing huge, just small moments that made me wonder if I was imagining things. When Blake and I got into arguments, they'd always make me apologize first, even if we were both wrong, even if he had started it. If I tried to argue my side, they'd tell me I was being difficult, dramatic, or too sensitive. When Blake got in trouble at school, my parents defended him, said the teachers were being unfair or that he was just stressed out. When I got in trouble, I got lectures about how I needed to make better choices. When Blake forgot things, my parents dropped everything to help. When I forgot something, they'd sigh and remind me that I needed to be responsible. It was like that my whole life. Little things that I brushed off because, well, what else was I supposed to do? When you grow up a certain way, you don't question it. You think that's just how life is. Blake was into sports, and my parents were obsessed with his games. Every weekend they were there, cheering, yelling at referees, fully invested. I was in choir. They never came to a single performance, not even once. When I asked why, they always had some excuse, but somehow they were never too tired for Blake's football games. I stopped asking after a while. It didn't feel worth it. And Blake never saw me as a real person, just an annoyance. If I got even a little attention, he'd roll his eyes or make some snide comment. When I won a small choir competition, he scoffed. Too bad nobody cares about choir. If I got a better grade than him, he'd break my pencils or mutter that I got lucky. He resented me for existing, like I was taking up space that should have been his. And my parents? They never stopped him. They just let it happen, like it was normal. Even in the conversations they had with family and friends, they adored talking about Blake. How talented he was, how smart, how he had a bright future ahead of him. When they talked about me, it was never about me. It was about how I supported Blake, how I was such a good sister, how I was always there for him. It was like my entire identity in their eyes was being his shadow. I told myself it didn't matter. I convinced myself that it wasn't that bad, that some families just have favorites, and that it didn't mean they didn't love me. I thought I was just being overly sensitive. I wish I had trusted myself more. Everything changed a year ago. Blake got diagnosed with kidney disease. My parents were devastated, and I was shocked too. He went through treatments, medications, all of it, but his condition kept getting worse. Eventually, the doctors told them that he needed a transplant, and the second they heard the word transplant, their eyes were on me. I remember sitting in the hospital room when the doctor mentioned it. My mom immediately turned to me and said, "Wouldn't it be amazing if you were a match?" She was already smiling, already acting like this was happening, like I was about to save the day just like I always had. My dad nodded, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Blake barely even looked up from his phone. I remember feeling so weird about it. I wasn't against helping. Of course, I didn't want my brother to die, but something about how quickly they decided that this was my responsibility made my stomach turn. It wasn't even a discussion. They didn't ask if I was okay with it. They didn't ask how I felt. It was expected. I went along with the testing because I didn't want to start a fight, and honestly, I kind of hoped I wouldn't be a match. I told myself that if I wasn't, then at least I wouldn't have to deal with the fallout. But of course, life doesn't work like that. I was a match. And the moment those results came in, it was like I had already agreed to the surgery. My mom cried tears of joy. My dad patted my back and said, "We knew you wouldn't let us down." Blake didn't even say anything at first, he just nodded. Like, yeah, that's what's supposed to happen. I felt sick. I tried to bring it up casually, just mentioned that this was a really big decision, that I wanted to take time to think about it, that I wasn't sure yet. My mom immediately shut it down. "Mia, this is your brother. You don't think twice about family." It wasn't a question, it was a command. My dad scoffed, shaking his head like I had said the dumbest thing imaginable. "What do you mean you're not sure? What kind of person hesitates when their own blood needs them?" That's when I started realizing just how trapped I was. I started doing my own research, looking up what kidney donation actually meant. I knew it was major surgery, but I didn't realize how much risk was involved, especially for me. I had some underlying health issues that made surgery more complicated. My doctor explained that my recovery wouldn't be like most donors. I wouldn't just bounce back in a few weeks. I could be out for months, and even after that, my body would never be the same. I'd be more prone to kidney disease myself. My risk for long-term complications was higher, and if, God forbid, something happened to my remaining kidney in the future, I'd be screwed. Then there was the financial part. I have student loans. I have a job that doesn't offer paid medical leave. If I did this, I wouldn't just be losing my kidney. I'd be losing my income, my stability, my ability to take care of myself. I could end up drowning in debt, all because my parents expected me to do this without question. And when I started thinking about all of this, I realized something even worse. Not once had my parents or Blake ever asked how I felt about this. They didn't ask if I was scared or if I was okay. They didn't sit me down and say, "Mia, this is your choice, and we support you no matter what." Because it wasn't a choice to them. It was a duty. I wasn't their daughter. I was their solution. I kept hoping that maybe I was wrong. That if I sat them down and explained all of this, they'd understand. That they'd realize what they were asking wasn't fair. That they'd actually see me for the first time. So that's what I did. I sat them down, took a deep breath, and told them, "I don't think I can do this." The second those words left my mouth, the entire room went silent. My mom's face froze, like her brain just refused to process what I had said. My dad blinked at me, confused, like I had suddenly started speaking a foreign language. And Blake, he just exhaled sharply, shook his head, and muttered, "Of course, typical." I don't know why I thought they'd actually listen. I don't know why I thought my feelings would matter to them for once. "What do you mean you don't think you can do this?" My mom's voice was sharp, like she was challenging me, not asking, like I had just made an absurd claim. I said, I've been talking to my doctor, and it's not a simple surgery for me. There are a lot of risks, and my recovery could take months. I'd have to take time off work, and My dad cut me off with a scoff. "So what? People donate kidneys all the time. They're fine." I tried to keep my voice steady. "Not everyone, and not me. My doctor said my situation is different. It's not just a few weeks of recovery. It's months. And financially, Oh, don't even start with that," my mom snapped, standing up so fast her chair scraped against the floor. "This is about your brother's life, Mia. How can you even think about money right now?" "Because it's my life too," I wanted to scream. "Because I'm the one who would have to live with the consequences. Because I wasn't even given the chance to decide this for myself before you all made up your minds." But I didn't say any of that. I could already feel it. The shift, the way their faces hardened the moment they realized I wasn't just hesitating. I was actually considering saying no. And just like that, I wasn't their daughter anymore. I was the problem. Blake rolled his eyes. "Unbelievable." I turned to him. "Blake, this isn't personal. You're making it personal," he shot back, standing up too. "You're choosing to let me die. That's not what I'm doing. I need time to think. What is there to think about?" My dad's voice was cold. "This is your brother, Mia. He'd do it for you." I actually laughed, a short, bitter laugh, because that was the biggest lie I had ever heard. "Would he?" I asked, looking directly at Blake. "Would you, Blake? If the situation was reversed, would you give me your kidney?" His eyes darted to our parents for half a second before he muttered, "That's not the point." "Right. Of course it wasn't." My mom was trying to hold back real anger now. "I can't believe you're doing this," she whispered, her voice breaking, "after everything we've done for you." That's when the guilt trip started. My dad started listing everything they had ever spent on me. My school tuition, my clothes, my childhood doctor's visits. My mom started crying. She kept repeating, "How could you do this to us?" Over and over, like I had just committed some unforgivable sin. They called me ungrateful, selfish, a disappointment. And then Blake delivered the final blow. "You know what, Mia?" His voice was cold. "I always knew you'd be useless when it actually mattered." That hurt. Not because I expected better from him, but because I didn't, and yet some stupid, pathetic part of me still hoped. My entire childhood flashed in my mind, every time I cheered for him on the sidelines, every time I gave up something I wanted so he could have it instead. I had always put him first because it was just expected of me, and now, the second I needed to put myself first, the second I dared to consider my own well-being, I was nothing to him. I felt something inside me crack. I just told them I don't want to talk about it anymore and was about to leave. It should have ended there. But my mom wasn't done. She gripped my arm as I was walking toward the door. She pressed so hard it hurt, her nails dug into my skin. Her face twisted with something I'd never seen before. "You are his sister," she hissed. "You were born to help him." I froze. I don't know what showed on my face, but the second those words left her mouth, she let go, like she had just realized she had said too much. "What?" I asked. She stepped back, wiping at her face, avoiding my eyes. My dad was suddenly too still. Even Blake shifted uncomfortably. Something in my stomach turned. "What do you mean I was born to help him?" No one answered. The silence was loud. I looked at my dad. Nothing. I looked at Blake. He wouldn't even look at me. Then my mom muttered, "You're being dramatic," and turned away. But I wasn't stupid, and I wasn't imagining things. I knew something was wrong. I just didn't know how bad it was. I don't even remember leaving the house. I must have grabbed my bag, my keys, something, because suddenly I was in my car, driving without knowing where I was going. I felt like I was about to throw up. My heart was pounding. So I pulled over at a gas station, only thinking about one thing. What did she mean? Why had she said that like it was fact? And why had my dad and Blake reacted like it was something I shouldn't have heard? I thought of going to my Aunt Melissa's house. I was barely holding myself together the whole way there. By the time I walked through her front door, I must have looked like a complete wreck because she didn't even ask questions. She just hugged me and told me to stay as long as I needed. I didn't sleep that night. By the time morning came, I felt like I was running on nothing but nerves. I sat at Aunt Melissa's kitchen table and told her everything. Every word, every look, every second of that horrible conversation. I expected her to tell me I was overthinking it, that my parents were just emotional, saying things they didn't mean, that I was letting my imagination run wild. But she didn't. Instead, she sighed, rubbed her temples like she was bracing herself, and said, "Mia, there's something I need to tell you." I felt my stomach tighten, waiting for her to continue. But she hesitated, like she was debating whether or not to say the words out loud. I knew it was bad. Finally, she exhaled and looked at me. "Your parents didn't have you because they wanted another child. They had you because Blake needed a bone marrow donor." I stared at her, waiting for her to say it was a bad joke, that she was mistaken, that she had misunderstood something. But she didn't. When he was 4, he got sick. They were desperate to save him and they couldn't find a match, so they made one. I heard the words, understood them, but it was like my brain refused to process them. My parents had planned me, not because they wanted me, but because they needed me. I wasn't born out of love or even an accident. I was born out of necessity. My whole life flashed through my mind, and suddenly everything made sense. Every moment that had ever made me feel like I was on the outside looking in, the way my achievements were never celebrated, the way my presence was never the priority, the way my parents always made it clear, subtly, in the small things, that Blake came first. It wasn't because they just happened to favor him, it was because he was the reason I existed in the first place. "They never told me?" Aunt Melissa nodded, her expression filled with something I couldn't quite place. "They were never going to. They raised you to believe this was just normal. They didn't think you ever needed to know." I couldn't speak. I had spent my entire life trying to earn their love, believing that if I did enough, then maybe I would finally matter to them the way Blake did. But I never stood a chance. I was never supposed to be anything more than a body they could use if Blake needed it. I don't remember much of what Aunt Melissa said after that. Just that she kept apologizing for not telling me sooner, like it was her fault. It wasn't. She hadn't been the one who lied to me my entire life. The next few days blurred together. I didn't go home. I ignored my parents' calls, their texts, and the messages they left on my voicemail. I needed to figure out how to exist now that I knew the truth. My parents acted like everything was fine, like we hadn't just had the worst fight of our lives. My mom's messages were strangely gentle, almost too understanding, like she was talking to a child having a tantrum. She told me she knew I was just overwhelmed and that she believed I'd come to the right decision once I had time to think. My dad's texts were brief, but just as unsettling. "We're ready to talk again when you are. Family sticks together. You know what's expected." Blake, of course, stayed silent. He didn't need to say anything. In his mind, there was no decision to make. A week passed, and when they realized I wasn't responding, the tone flipped. My mom's messages turned, her disappointment practically dripping from every word. My dad stopped pretending to be reasonable. You're making him suffer for nothing. This is the kind of thing you regret for the rest of your life. The kindness was gone. Now they were just waiting for me to crack. I blocked them. I don't know why I expected them to stop. Blocking them gave me a few days of silence, but it was the kind that felt too quiet, like the moment before a storm. I kept checking over my shoulder, expecting something, but I didn't know what. My aunt told me I was doing the right thing, that I needed to focus on myself, but I could see the way she watched me, like she was waiting for me to break. Maybe she thought I would cave, that I would suddenly snap out of whatever stubborn streak I was on and go back to being the daughter my parents expected. And honestly, a small horrible part of me wondered if she was right, because for as much as I hated them, for as much as I had every reason to walk away, it still felt unnatural to not care. It felt like I was betraying some invisible contract that had been forced on me since birth. Then, on a random Tuesday night, the storm hit. I got pulled over on my way to work. I wasn't speeding. My registration was up to date. I wasn't on my phone. There was no reason for me to be pulled over. But when the officer walked up to my window, he wasn't looking for a traffic violation. "Ma'am, we received an anonymous tip regarding illegal substances in your vehicle. I'm going to have to ask you to step out of the car." My entire body went cold. "What?" I managed to say. "Step out of the car, please." I knew I had nothing to hide. I had never done anything illegal in my life. But the way he said it, the way he looked at me like this was already a done deal, made my hands shake as I unbuckled my seatbelt and got out. They searched my car, and then, under my driver's seat, they found a small plastic bag filled with drugs. I had never seen that bag before. I didn't know where it had come from. But the second I saw it, I knew. I knew exactly what had happened. I barely heard the officer say they needed to bring me in for questioning. I was too busy trying to piece together how they had done it. It had to have been my family. They took me to the station, but I wasn't under arrest yet. I kept telling them the same thing over and over. It wasn't mine. I had never seen it before. I'm sure someone set me up. And then, after what felt like an eternity, the officer sighed and said, "There are security cameras in that parking lot, right?" I almost collapsed from relief. It took time to review the footage, and every second that passed I could feel my whole life dangling on the edge of a cliff. If the cameras didn't catch anything, if they couldn't prove I didn't do this, then what would the first get fired? Would I get charged? Would my parents come bail me out just so they could say, "See, you need us now, do what we're asking"? But then finally, one of the officers nodded and said, "Found something." I held my breath as they pulled up the footage, and there, clear as day, was Blake. He wasn't even subtle about it. He crouched next to my car, glanced around a few times, then slid the bag under my seat like he had done it a million times before. I didn't know whether to scream or laugh. The officers exchanged glances. One of them nodded. "She's free to go," he said, "but we're going to have to bring him in." The next few hours passed in a blur. I sat in the station, numb, while they arrested Blake. He didn't resist. He didn't even try to explain. I could already picture how this would go. He'd act remorseful, say it was a mistake, blame his emotional state, and somehow my parents would make sure he got the least possible punishment. And my parents? They showed up within an hour, furious. Not at him, at me. My mom was in full hysterics, crying into a tissue, her voice too loud, making sure everyone in that station heard her suffering. "He's sick," she kept saying. "He's sick. He didn't know what he was doing. You have to understand." My dad yelled at me, "You forced him into this." His eyes were filled with something I couldn't place. "You made him desperate." I stared at them. "Are you kidding me?" My voice came out too quiet, too controlled, too dangerous. "You saw the footage. He tried to get me arrested. You're really blaming me for that?" "He wouldn't have done this if you had just done what you were supposed to do," my mom snapped, dabbing at her fake tears. "You pushed him to this, Mia. You left him with no other choice." At that moment, watching them go crazy for Blake, something in me snapped. For years, I had let them make me feel like I wasn't good enough, like I was selfish for wanting things for myself, like if I just tried harder, if I was just a little better, they would finally love me the way they loved Blake. But here I was, standing in a police station, staring at the undeniable proof that my brother had just tried to ruin my life, and they still chose him. There was never a version of this where they would choose me, and I was done pretending otherwise. I turned to my mom, barely recognizing my own voice when I spoke. "You did this to me. You made him this way." She blinked at me, still playing the devastated mother act. What are you talking about? She sniffled, shaking her head like I was speaking nonsense. I took a step forward. Aunt Melissa told me, I said. She told me why you had me. My mom's face changed instantly. The tears stopped like she had flipped a switch. My dad, who had been standing stiffly beside her, suddenly looked too still. I don't know what she told you, my mom said, but she's always wanted to turn you against us. I let out a short, bitter laugh. That's what you're going with? That she lied? I took another step closer, forcing them to look at me. Tell me the truth, I said. Did you have me just so I could be a donor for Blake? My mom glanced at my dad, but neither of them spoke. I felt the anger rising in my chest, hot and suffocating. Say it. My mom looked at me for a long moment before finally tilting her chin up. We did what we had to do, she said, voice sharp. You wouldn't be here if it weren't for Blake. The words hit harder than I thought they would. I mean, I already knew. Aunt Melissa had told me, and deep down it made sense. It explained everything. But hearing my mom say it so easily, like it was just a fact, like I was being ridiculous for even questioning it, that still stung. I had spent my entire life trying to make sense of why I always felt like I was there but not really part of them. And now I had my answer. I looked at my dad, half expecting him to at least try to soften the blow. Maybe say something like that's not how it was or you're misunderstanding. But he didn't. No hesitation, no guilt, just a simple, flat, we saved his life. That was the priority, not me. Never me. So that's it? I asked, more to myself than to them. That's all I ever was to you, a backup plan? My mom didn't even look fazed. If anything, she looked annoyed, like she was tired of the conversation and just wanted to move past it. We raised you. We gave you everything you needed. You had a home, food, and education. And now, when it's your turn to step up for this family, you're turning your back on us? That was actually funny. Oh, so now I'm part of the family? I shook my head. You didn't want me. You just needed me. One of the officers cleared his throat, reminding us all where we were. If you're done, we have charges to process. My mom turned to them so fast it was like she forgot I was even there. You don't understand. My son, he was just desperate. He wasn't thinking clearly. I glanced at the officer. He didn't even blink. The security footage speaks for itself, ma'am. That's when my dad shifted tactics. Instead of defending Blake, he took a step toward the officer. We can work something out. There's no need for all this. We don't want to escalate things. He was negotiating. Like Blake hadn't just tried to frame me for a crime, like this was just some little problem that could be handled with the right words. That was it. That was all I needed to know. I turned to the officer. My decision was already made. I'd like to press charges. My mom sucked in a breath, like I had just slapped her across the face. Mia, you wouldn't. I would. My dad said, You're making a mistake. I met his eyes without flinching. No, I said. The mistake was ever thinking you cared about me. And that was it. I was done. It's been over a year since I walked out of that police station, and every day since I've been learning what it means to live without them. At first it felt surreal, like I was waiting for the inevitable, waiting for them to show up and force me back into the role I was supposed to play. But the longer I stayed away, the more I realized something terrifying. They were never going to change. They had always been like this. I was just finally seeing it for what it was. Blake stayed in prison. My parents did everything they could to get him out, but money only stretches so far when you've already mortgaged your house to the limit trying to save your golden child. I thought once they saw how serious this was, they'd stop, that they'd take a step back and finally leave me alone. But they didn't. Instead, they started a GoFundMe. I wish I was joking. My mom made this entire sob story about how I had abandoned them and how Blake was wrongfully accused. She painted herself as the heartbroken mother of a sick child struggling to keep the family together while her selfish daughter ruined everything. And of course, people ate it up. Distant relatives, family, friends, even complete strangers donating, leaving comments about how awful I was, how family should come first. I might have just let them dig their own graves and moved on with my life. But then one night, as I sat at my Aunt Melissa's kitchen table, she sighed and looked at me like she had an idea she wasn't sure I'd go for. We should talk to your old doctor. I frowned. What doctor? The one they took you to when you were a kid, the family doctor. He might have records. Proof. I didn't need proof. I already knew what they had done, But if there were documents, something undeniable that exposed them, maybe I could stop them from pulling this kind of thing ever again. So we tracked him down. Dr. Evans had retired years ago, but when we explained why we wanted to talk to him, he agreed to meet. I wasn't expecting much, maybe a few confirming details, maybe just reassurance that I wasn't crazy. But what he told me was worse than anything I had ever imagined. I wasn't their second child, I was their fourth attempt. They had conceived 3 babies before me, 3 pregnancies, 3 terminations, the moment genetic testing showed the fetus wasn't a perfect match for Blake. They weren't trying for a second child, they were trying to build one. I felt sick. My entire life I had believed, hoped, that maybe deep down there was love there, that maybe if I had just been enough, if I had done more, tried harder, they would have loved me like they loved him. But I never even stood a chance. I wasn't born because they wanted me. I was born because I was the first successful one. Melissa held my hand as I sat there trying to breathe while Dr. Evans handed me old records. Medical documents, things my parents probably thought I'd never see. I took them, and I made a decision. I sent everything to the authorities. Once the investigation started, it spiraled fast. The fertility doctor they worked with lost his license immediately. Turns out my parents weren't even the only ones who had done this. There were other families, other donor babies created under the same circumstances. The scandal exploded. My parents lost everything. The GoFundMe donations dried up. Family members who had supported them vanished. Their names were dragged through the mud. And instead of admitting what they had done, they just doubled down. My dad called it fake news. My mom said they were being persecuted for being good parents, and Blake sat in prison still acting like none of this was his fault. For the longest time I thought they would disappear into the mess they created and leave me alone. But my parents had one last stunt left in them. One night my cousin Jenna called me. Her voice panicked. "Mia, I don't know if you've heard, but Blake tried to take his own life." I felt something heavy drop in my chest. "What?" "I just saw your mom's post. She's saying he couldn't take it anymore, that he's in critical condition, that if you have even a shred of love left for your family, you'd come see him." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. I wanted to believe it wasn't true, but what if it was? What if, despite everything, he really had hit rock bottom? So I checked. I called the prison. I didn't ask for details, didn't want to get sucked into another manipulation game. I just asked, "Is my brother alive?" The officer on the phone sounded almost bored when he answered, "Yeah, he's fine." I exhaled slowly. "Is he in critical condition?" A pause then, not even close. That was it. That was all I needed to hear. They were lying again. They had faked his suicide attempt just to guilt me into coming back. Well, I wasn't even surprised. They had never cared about the truth, only about control. I didn't respond. I didn't acknowledge them. Instead, I sent the Facebook post to the authorities. Within a week, my parents had nothing left. Family members finally cut them off. Their remaining friends abandoned them. My mom deleted her social media. My dad stopped trying to fight. It's been over a year now, and my life is nothing like it used to be. I moved to a new city, got a new job, and for the first time ever I feel like I actually belong somewhere. And the best part? I'm engaged. Ryan knows everything, every dark, twisted detail of what my family put me through, and instead of treating me like some broken, tragic story, he treats me like a person, like I matter. And the biggest change, I'm pregnant. At first, I was terrified. After everything I had been through, I was scared that I wouldn't know how to be a good parent, that I'd somehow repeat the same mistakes my parents made. But then Ryan told me something that changed everything. You know exactly what not to do. And he's right. This baby will never grow up wondering if they were wanted. They will never feel like they have to earn my love. They will never be treated like a spare part for someone else. They will be loved, fully, completely, unconditionally. I may not have been born into a real family, but I am creating one. And for the first time in my life, I am truly happy. Thank you to everyone who has supported me through all of this. I can't even explain how much it's meant to know that I'm not crazy for walking away. I finally feel like I have a future worth looking forward to,